And it doesn't work when we're sat in the same room as each other.
Yeah,
hello, everyone. Hello. And welcome to Redgate DBAle, the podcast that is all about data and beer.
Faces and ales.
And also, I can touch your face.
Oh.
Yes, that's right. We are right here and in person, and the camera really does add 20 pounds. I mean, or maybe that's just all the food I ate.
I was going to say, does the camera add 20 pounds?
No.
Or does all the sugar add 20 pounds?
I don't eat much sugar. I mostly, well, alcohol turns to sugar.
It's just oil. It's just all the oil.
I've just been chugging like oil seed rape, just like blah, 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 blah.
All the nuggets.
the vegan
Am I going to have to
nuggets.
sanitize the size of my head now?
Absolutely. Well, that's right. Welcome everyone to episode 39, I think. Where we are celebrating everything stories. Yes, because we are doing so in honor of International Short Story Day. So today we're going to be talking all about short stories. We're going to be talking about stories about DevOps approaches, about approaches to kind of like agile development, especially as it pertains to database development, database deployment as well. We'll also be referencing a few other special days that are happening. We'll also talk about I've also got a couple of short stories written by myself.
Amazing.
that was the challenge I was given by Chris K. But of course, before any of that, the intro. And of course, I am your loving, daring, dashing, now incredibly chubby, thanks to lockdown, host, Chris.
And I'm Chris.
No flair here, everyone. No flair at all. So, Chris, what's happening today? What are we drinking?
Well, the short story that is DBAle is not really a short story. It's kind of a long one.
It has been a long one. Yeah, 39 episodes. DBAle has now been going DBAle Season One because we short-sightedly didn't think it would last this long and therefore didn't break into seasons and have ended up with one incredibly long 3.5-year long season.
Yeah, which is like almost half your life.
Hey! You're like a year older than me.
2 years. Count and Chris.
Every time.
2 years. Class of Leavers 2010.
I was Class of Leavers 2010.
Yeah. So we thought we'd celebrate with some champagne.
Absolutely. So the end of season one, finally the end of season one.
That's
everyone's
more
been waiting
episodes in season one than most anime shows.
I don't know. There was a lot of episodes in season one of
anyway,
Attack on Titan and Sword Art Online. Anyway, so we have been gifted by the wonderful producer Louise and everyone here at Redgate. We've been gifted some champagne. We've been gifted some Moet et Chandon, which if you were listening to last month's episode, you'll know I referenced Moet et Chandon. And this time we actually have some. So we've actually got some poured out because we're not going to drink an entire bottle of Moet. But oh my God, it does smell good. Okay, hang on. In lieu of popping the cork or anything, let's see if we can hear the bubbles.
You're gonna have to turn that off. Sorry.
No, but that's fine. So, so I would, before we get into today's subject, I would like to propose a toast. I'd like to make some toast, which is still one of my favorite lines of all films ever. I'd like to make some toast. Despicable Me, if you were wondering. But I'd like to make a toast to Chris K, my wonderful DBAle other half, and also to producer Louise. It is also National Short Girl Appreciation Day. So here's to you, Lou. And of course, to everyone at Redgate who has made DBAle possible the last 3.5 years. To this end, I say cheers.
Cheers. I would like to toast you, but I'm not allowed to, so sorry.
Oh, okay.
It's the thought that counts, though.
Sorry?
It's the thought that counts.
It is the thought that counts, absolutely. And yeah, it's a bit of a weird episode. It's the last episode of the series. We're also sat in a room together. If you're wondering why the audio quality is so much better, that's because we actually have a much better microphone.
All of a sudden, we can't hear Chris again. It's great.
Yeah, this is true. Wait, I could have sworn that we could have heard Chris Kurzweil, even if we did have to put up with the amount of banging on his desk, the slurping, and of course the sound of your, of your microphone turning
All
on and
of
off.
that is just a failure of your editing.
Clearly. But regardless, let's get into the subject. Let's actually talk now that we're in the same room, and we are doing so in a COVID-safe environment. If anyone was listening, we are being COVID-safe. I'm also triple jabbed, haha. And we've been very secure and safe the whole time. But it's just nice to be in the same place as this beautiful person.
We were
again.
Extremely secure and safe until about 5 minutes ago.
Until I popped myself down next to you, yeah. I'm actually going to beat him up after this episode.
2 meters, Chris.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
Hello.
the main topic of today.
Can you still hear me?
No.
Okay. There we go. That's going to be fun.
Poetry in motion.
Poetry in motion. Funny you should mention that. We'll get onto that. So, we were going to talk. So we were going to talk about stories, particularly today. So it is Short Story Appreciation Day. I've been a bit naughty with my own. I've actually written 3 poems because I consider them.
No.
Well, because there's different formats. So I've written 3 little poems. They're not big.
You promised me, Chris. You promised me no more poetry.
I mean, ever since I stood outside your balcony door that night and sang to you, like, I thought everything was different. No. So the interesting thing is that we talk about stories, right? And most often when we talk about development stories, we talk about the kind of the beginnings of feature development. We come up with user stories, we come up with jobs to be done for any designers out there. And when it comes to these stories, the idea behind kind of an agile DevOpsy approach is that we take small incremental pieces of work, right? So you break something down. And the number of times we work with customers, for instance, who work with anyone other than customers. No, we work with customers, we work with clients. And they say to us things like, okay, really interested in implementing the Redgate tooling for source control and continuous integration, continuous deployment, that sort of thing, which is fair enough. But then they start talking about like monolithic feature branches. They start talking about, oh, how does the tool cope with us having 4 different branches open at the same time for 2 to 3 months or so? And that fundamentally doesn't work, does it?
No, I always hate it when you go to talk to a customer or client and the first thing they open up with is the things they care about. That really sucks. Nothing grinds my gears. I just want to talk about my amazing thing. You stop. I don't know. I think we work in like a customer-facing environment.
Yes.
But even if you've never had experience of working in a customer-facing environment, you will have had an experience where you will have been a customer.
Yes.
So, for example, if you go to you've got a garden project.
Very unlikely. Go on.
Let's say that you want to change a bit of your garden.
Yes.
At the end of your garden, you have, I don't know why I'm referring to you. I have this problem.
Okay,
so I've got a garden, and at the end of my garden, I've got some sleepers.
Next to the gate.
Yeah, next to the gate. You see them. I'm starting to go wrong. So what I want to do...
Why are they going wrong? How does a sleeper go
rotten.
wrong? Oh.
Yeah. So I'm calling up some people and I'm explaining to people what I want to do is replace these with some brick bits and expand it out a bit and have a nice gradual slope down rather than this sudden abrupt bit for the walking bit.
Makes perfect sense.
And what the people I'm trying to talk to will have to translate these things into their language. So they'll be saying, all right, so what you want then is a retaining wall and some paved steps, which makes sense.
Yes.
And that's a really clear way of explaining that concise problem. But me as a customer, naive customer, I don't know these terms. I don't know what the term retaining wall means.
Yes. I didn't know what a French drain was until about 6 months ago.
Exactly. You go to professionals, whoever it might be, and you relay your problem that you're trying to solve. You don't speak about the terms in their languages. And, you know, a big part of DevOps is, or a big part of Agile generally, is changing the mindset. So where we can deliver these features, that's great, but to the people we're trying to deliver these features to, they don't care about the features. The features don't matter. What matters to them is their problem that they're looking to solve. And this is a big part of our lives. Like in our jobs, we have to be very aware of that, and we have to be very like conscious of communicating in terms of what they want rather than what we have.
Yes, absolutely. The the interesting thing, I suppose, is that there's a number of wheels moving when you start talking about new feature development. And normally a mandate is handed down to the development team for whatever reason. We're adding a new field to the website, we're doing X, Y, Z to the application. And what we need to do is we also need to represent these changes as part of the database. So we need you to also generate the necessary database change to be tied to that change within the code base, get it committed, raise a pull request, etc. But the problem is that when you're building software, it's not quite the same as like a gardening project where, yes, you lay out all of the things that need to be done and there is translation that needs to be done. That's definitely a similarity. You have to translate the user requirement, the job to be done, into how it can be done using your technology. And that's something that has very much been done here at Redgate. I've been part of the meetings where people have discussed jobs to be done, where people have talked about, what happens if a user wants to do X, Y, or Z with the software. But ultimately, the interesting thing is, and this is a phrase I've used probably a lot in the past when we've been recording DBAle, is that you can automate all the pipelines you want. If you don't have the right working practices to go along with that technology and your people, you're only going to automate I have to think of how to phrase this, the rubbish, right? You're automating how much faster the mess is going to hit the fan. Because, that's all it is. And really it's about breaking it down, talking about stories, but getting together as a team. And, I'm a huge proponent of mob programming and pair programming, getting everyone together in a room to work on a particular problem. I think that's great. Getting multiple people to sign off on a pull request. These sorts of things, they're not blockers. They are ways of building quality into your pipeline.
Yeah, and like for me, it's not losing sight of what the actual user wants rather than what you think is a good feature. Like what you think is a good feature might be a great feature, don't get me wrong, but the user experience is central and key to this. Make sure that every single thing is tied into what that user is trying to do, and the user story is the way of framing that.
Yes.
The user is trying to do this, and it's great because if you think about like old traditional ways of doing IT, you can kind of tell when that hasn't been considered. You get acronyms like RTFM and PubCac and LMGTFY. All of these things that kind of indicate that the onus of why the product isn't working is because of the user.
Yeah.
The user is doing something wrong.
It's a pick error.
Yeah. And ultimately, like the user is trying to do this thing. If your application isn't guiding them in that process as best possible, then that's a failure. But it's not easy. I'm not trying.
No, absolutely not. It's not easy at all. But we want to.
Yeah, we want to be blameless, right? Like DevOps is a large part of DevOps is having a blameless culture.
Yes.
And blamelessly assigning blame to Chris.
Absolutely, blameless, completely blamelessly.
The part of that story that often gets missed is the user. So I'm a big proponent of like making sure the user doesn't get lost.
So the interesting thing there, and there's two things I want to touch on as like a result of what you've talked about there. So the first thing was this kind of idea of a blame-free culture and accountability, right? So there's a huge, huge difference between you did a bad thing and, oh, actually, we've learned something for the future.
Yeah.
And I think a really good example of this was recently AWS had an outage. Literally like a week ago, AWS had an outage, like the third of the internet wasn't working really. And so many people tweeted like, huh, I'd hate to be the person who pushed that to production at Amazon, you know, their head must be on the chopping block. And actually the head technician, the head developer of the team where that happened, the person who made that change happen, publicly came out with a post that said, oh, well, actually here at Amazon, and you know, you think about Amazon what you will, some people are like, oh, massive conglomerate, crazy, like taking over everything, taking over the world. Some people are like, actually, it's really convenient, they do some really cool stuff. However you feel, the way that this team handled this problem was really interesting, because he publicly came out and said, no, we don't practice that level of blame here at in our development team. That's not how we work. It was a learning opportunity. Mistakes happen. You know, invariably, however the process goes, something can go wrong. And it's how you recover from that incident, how you learn from that incident. And it was a really mature, people-first way of tackling the situation, which I thought was great.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well. Like, again, Amazon is, regardless of how you personally feel about them, but the ethics behind supporting very large companies like Amazon, that aside, like they are so successful because they are fundamentally agile as a company.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, it's crazy that they are able to pivot so easily and cover so many bases. They see what's going to be big and they build into it, and it shows.
And it's the difference in the mindset and the working practice that's the difference between AWS was down for a couple of hours, taking out a third of the internet, and Amazon, like AWS, being down for like days and taking down the internet for days, which would have been a major problem.
Yeah, for sure.
And the interesting thing there is, I think it comes back to the second point I wanted to make, which is the idea of incremental deployments. So we've talked about incremental deployments before on DBAle, but we haven't really talked about like the strategies or anything. The interesting thing is, when your changes are small, when your changes affect very few objects, when your changes to one object and it's a very small change and you're deploying 600 times a day, well, would you rather deploy, I feel like this is a leading question, would you rather deploy 600 times a day and bear the overhead that potentially comes with multiple deployments? Or would you like to deploy once a day, once every couple of days, and it be some big behemoth deployment? I mean, I realize I'm saying once every 1 or 2 days, and it's a behemoth deployment, and regularly we deploy every couple of months. But the interesting thing is, how do you expect to remain competitive as a company? How do you expect to make sure you're deploying the right things? How do you expect to get incremental feedback on what you're developing if you're just working to big bang deployments? And it happens all the time. Oh, yeah, we do work in sprints, but our work only makes it so far as staging, and then we deploy everything every 6 months. I'm sorry, but what if one thing breaks in the middle of that? Like, how is that a recoverable event? That's hours, days worth of work to roll back. And this is why it's a good story, because keeping stories short, celebrating short stories, keeping stories short is ideal. Keeping work small is best, and keeping development changes incremental is the best. You know, you're not going to, there's obviously ways of doing like blue-green deployments. There's ways of, if you add a column to a table or rename a table, you know, it's not black and white. You don't just, you know, oh, I'm going to create table B, move the data from table A into table B, and then drop table A. That's not what we're suggesting at all. What we're thinking is, like, make the change, make something use table B with the new data in it, and if it breaks, you've still got table A sat there ready to go. If things are successful and things are successfully pushed to prod, later do the deletion of table A.
Yeah.
It's even smaller. Doesn't have to just be one migration script that does the whole thing. As small as you can possibly get it, deploy as many times as you like.
There's an analogy I really like here. Maybe not an analogy, but a real world example of this.
A short story, if you will.
A short story. So video games. When
Yes.
you think about video games over the course of our lifetimes. So
Grim
I've always
Fandango.
been a PlayStation kind of guy.
I've always been a mobile gamer, Angry Birds kind of person.
Yeah, I can see that. You think about like the 90s, and you get a PlayStation game. It comes on a disc. You put the disc in.
Is it Crash Team Racing?
It can be whatever you want it to be.
Crash Team Racing it is.
You've got that game, you put it in, you play it, and there's a bug. And for whatever reason, it doesn't load.
Oh, so Orphan Scion of Sorcery.
Yeah, the only way that you can get that updated is to get a new copy of the game and the hope that there is a version 2 of the game that has the bug fix, which, it was rare that would ever happen because they knew that they can update it once it was out there. But still, like there were lots of very buggy games
Absolutely
in the 90s because, once they were out there, they're out there. You fast forward a few years and people can do post-launch updates, which people say a lot of bad things about, but this means that you give developers more time to fix things, catch things that go out to live, they get feedback, they can fix it. And now you've got to this point where you think about what the biggest video game is at the moment, and you can measure it in a lot of different ways. It's arguable, but I'd say Minecraft probably.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And Minecraft is a fantastic example of a game that was developed and built using a MVP model. So they've got something that is very, very small and incrementally built and built and built and built and built and built. Things like creepers were accidentally added to the game and then incorporated into the game when it turned out to be
quite
big
popular
deal.
with the players. Yeah,
exactly. And yeah, video games are very much transitioned or are in the process of transitioning that way. Now, don't get me wrong, this doesn't always go amazingly, and I don't always love the kind of games that
was it Cyberpunk that was released that was like half finished, or
oh yeah, or like but it's interesting to see how that's been applied. Anyway, that's my story. What about your stories, Chris? We've avoided the poetry.
So let's sum this up because we're not going to get onto the news just yet. We've only been going for half an hour, so we've still got a little bit to talk about. But short summary almost, I suppose, would be if you're trying to adopt DevOps, don't try to adopt DevOps in a half-assed approach, right? Don't try to adopt DevOps and think just because I've got the right people who know my systems inside and out, and just because I've bought the tooling from JetBrains, from Redgate, from, just because I've bought, licenses for Bitbucket and Bitbucket pipelines, whatever, don't think that that's the be all and end all just because you've got the right tools, all day long.
Small caveat here though, like I would say you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it all at once though, right?
No, absolutely. That's the point we're trying to make.
Yeah, exactly. Incremental approach to rolling out DevOps is quite meta, but whatever.
Yeah, take an incremental approach to rolling out the incremental approach. And in my experience, generally speaking, people have seen success with just trying to reduce those sprints, trying to minimize the work that's being done. I've gone from speaking to people who would try to generate deployment scripts which would have hundreds of statements in, changing potentially thousands of different objects. And the problem with that is that you end up with this kind of breakdown of communication. You end up with, even though you're putting it in version control, you don't end up with the accountability that you would like. Even when you're deploying, even though it goes out okay to staging, prod still has all the data in. So there's definitely something to be said for, taking a request, breaking it down into the smallest possible changes, making it, capturing it, deploying it, and building in that process and trying to merge and deploy on a significantly more frequent basis. Because the worst case scenario is that something does break, but if something does break and you're working in a more incremental way, It's easier to roll forward. It's significantly easier to fix that problem in dev because you already know what the problem is. You know, it's not one part of a 600 object script. It's one script, and that's been delivered more frequently. So you're able to easily go, right, done, we're sorted. So definitely that kind of shorter story incremental approach is definitely best for development. Anyway, I've put it off long enough, so this is me putting it off. So I've got 3 here. Okay. No looking. Oh, 3 here. So I was thinking about short stories, and you know, I wrote a short story not that long ago. I entered it into a short story competition when I was a kid. I was only about 12 or 13 when I wrote it, and it was this tiny short story. It was about how can you communicate, you know, a mixture of emotions in a short story with only 3 lines.
Okay.
And yeah, anyway, I came like 9th out of probably like 700 people who entered, which was pretty good. I thought it was good. And basically my story in its entirety, my entire 3-line story was just, it was like 2 teenagers embrace in the moonlight. 2 teenagers embrace in the moonlight. They hold each other's hands. Their braces lock. That was it. That was the 3-line story, and it did really well.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's really genuinely good. I like that. The twist is
it's
good.
like Anyway, so I've got 3 different poems, because poems are in themselves, I would say, a type of short story. Feel free to tell me if I'm wrong. Feel free to at me on Twitter and just say, hey, no, Chris, poems definitely don't count as short stories. I have picked 3 types of poem that I would say convey a short story, and all I have themed around DevOps.
Okay.
You ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay, so the first one I've got is a limerick.
A limerick?
Yes.
Okay.
So there was a young man from, anyway. So my limerick is, it's great when the world does a DevOps.
Yeah.
That is until something big pops. Out of process changes, some heated exchanges, and we end up with something more DevOps. Thank you.
Oh, great. Well, I'll give you 10 out of 10 for effort.
I appreciate that. There was definitely effort there. Anyway,
Rhyming DevOps with DevOps is
close.
Close.
But I would say
rhyming
it's fine.
changes with exchanges. That's questionable. That's.
I suppose changes is technically in the word, but anyway,
That's excellent. Okay.
it's not. I don't think it's my favorite one, so I've saved my favorite one till last.
Cool.
So my second one is an acrostic poem, which is where the letters spell out something. So the first letter of each sentence.
Yeah.
So we've got dedicated environments make it easy. Enforce coding standards and it's breezy. Version control, no need to blame. Open and honest is the game. Pull request, build and deployment. Stop firefighting. Bring back code enjoyment.
Amazing. That was good. I like that.
And of course, the first letters are
DevOps.
DEV OPS. I was very pleased with that one.
That's good. That's very good.
Cool. So the next one is, the final one is my favorite, and it's a haiku. So for anyone who doesn't know, a haiku is a Japanese, it comes from Japan, and it obviously has been adopted into Western poetry as well. And it's a short 3-line poem that has 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and then 5 syllables again.
Okay.
Cool. Push change to master. No need for pull request. Oh no, it's on fire. Oh dear.
That was good.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Well
That's my brainchild of being on the bus this morning. Cheers.
Excellent.
Right, now, because we're in the same room, it's actually possible for us to do this again for the final time.
This is going to be awful now.
Are you ready for what time it is? Because it is time for the news. outside. No.
Someone out there is like, oh man, I don't know how I just turned tone deaf.
Someone out there is, and stop and move over to a better podcast. If you're looking for one, Dr. Rangan Chatterjee's podcast is great. Feel better, live longer. Love it. Anyway.
I'll take your word for it. All right, so number one thing in the news is the thing that's on everyone's lips at the moment.
Yeah, we were thinking about something else, weren't we? We were talking about like the Gravita breach and the AWS outage.
Yeah, and then like this came along and we're like, oh, well, I guess that's the news.
Yeah.
So, have you heard about something called Log4j?
Log4j? No, Chris, I haven't. What is it?
Log4j is a small logging bit of software that is open source and as a result in a lot of Java applications by default. It's about 20 years old, I guess incrementally developed since then.
But Chris, how many devices use Java?
Quite a few, at least two. At least two.
Maybe if you go by what Oracle says, it's 3 billion devices.
Quite a lot, yeah.
Just a couple.
Quite a lot. And yeah, so it's quite a cool bit of software. People love it. As I said, it's very much embraced by the open source community.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And unfortunately, has a little bug in it, which enables you to use it to effectively, well, write in a line.
In the log file.
And then read that line back and execute that line. And that can mean that if you've written a URL, you'll download local to where Log4j is installed.
Yes, indeed.
The executable that I'm guessing you've linked to, and then you can execute that executable. That's a win. And unfortunately, that really, really circumvents a lot of security things everywhere. Oops.
Oh. On 3 billion devices. Well, no, let's be fair, right? The most recent version of Log4j, right? The most up-to-date version that actually has this patched, right? There is bound to be devices and bound to be software out there that has already bumped this. You know, where they do package up this dependency, it might have already been updated. These things are already kind of well in hand, but there's a number of security researchers who are saying that this is the most, we've definitely just gone, hang on. This is what happens when you are in a room where you don't move all that much. Hang on. No, doesn't like
close the door.
No, I can do this.
Hey!
We're back. So for anyone who isn't watching the video, we just went dark in the studio, but we're back. So anyway, so this is something that security researchers are saying is potentially the most, what's the word? Egregious.
I was going to say, were you looking for egregious?
Yes. So the most egregious security incident in a decade.
The most egregious security incident since the last one.
Since the last one, absolutely. And we've talked about previous events, like we've talked about, I've got a blank.
How long ago was Heartbleed? Did we cover Heartbleed?
A while. And then there was Spectre, the Spectre exploit.
Yeah.
We talked about SolarWinds problem, like with the man in the middle attack. Was it supply chain attack? And then,
how long till Y2K? That was... I heard someone talk about Y2K recently, and I'm like, sorry, this is a complete aside, but Y2K, this huge issue that people could very easily test by changing the date on the local system machine.
Well, that's true, but everyone says Y2K didn't happen, but actually it was the result of a lot of hard work by a lot of global programmers to make sure that Y2K didn't happen. And people were like, oh, it was never a problem, and programmers were like, yeah, it was a big problem, but we fixed it, so you're welcome. Anyway. Well,
I still think the media definitely blew it out.
Oh, it was definitely blown a bit more out of proportion.
A lot of sysadmins who were working during the time weren't bothered about it.
Fair. But
anyway.
So Log4j, obviously, major problem. We can we can absolutely say that none of the Redgate tools, thank goodness, suffer from this problem because we use .NET and therefore don't utilize this package.
With the exception
of Flyway, obviously, which is Java-based. However, we don't package up that dependency. And we've also bumped,
pretty handy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've also bumped the minimum required version of it to the patched version. So absolutely nothing to do with the Redgate tools. No need to worry about Log4j for Redgate.
However, like basically every company worldwide now, we're like, so where do we have this installed? Because it is installed somewhere.
And it needs to be updated.
Yep. And so we've got this great problem. And I mean, we as a global community are literally just tracking back and finding where it is, because, you know, you don't tend to check your Java dependencies that much, right?
No, this is true. And the interesting thing is there's a lot of Java applications out there that will have updated versions. However, it's more likely, I was watching a video today from the person who discovered the exploit, and funnily enough, because Chris mentioned Minecraft, obviously Minecraft was discovered.
Yeah.
It was discovered by someone exploiting Log4j on the Minecraft server that they were part of. And the interesting thing about that is that, you know, he pointed out in that video that yes, maybe 3 billion devices globally use Java, right? And yes, a very large percentage of them will use Log4j. Sorry, the champagne's gone right to my head. It's got me the hiccups. Yes, a good percentage of them will use Log4j. And it is more likely that there are more, significantly more, of those devices that are massively out of date than there are completely up to date patched devices. So the interesting problem we have here is things need to be updated. People need to find the dependencies they're using and they need to get it bumped. And this is one of the biggest IT problems in years, you know, from an actual, what's the word? It begins with a D.
I don't know, Chris.
Logistical.
Begins with a D.
Doesn't begin with a D. Distribution, I was thinking. It actually became logistics in my brain. But this is a huge logistical problem for the IT industry. Massive.
Yeah, I mean, at least this is a software problem. Like,
oh, yes.
If you think back to like Spectre, Heartbleed, that was like a physical problem. To fix that, you had to get a new chip a lot of the time. Not all the time.
I don't know enough about it. But
anyway. Yeah, and you've almost got this arms race now of like the people who are out, like searching through the systems, trying to patch it, trying to like get on top of it, and the people trying to exploit it. And like, you know, I'm sure the community is coming up with a lot of like tools to help out. And at the same time, like another community is coming up with a lot of tools to scan so they can exploit as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And I've already seen that there are a lot of instances of standard, malicious code that is being executed using this, whether it be like coin farming operations or something more sinister than that. And this is one cool thing I saw that I thought was amazing, but someone had actually written some code that uses log4shell to patch log4shell. So that they can...
Oh, it uses the exploit to patch the exploit.
Yeah, which is hilarious. Also extremely illegal. Don't
use
run that on someone else's system thinking you're giving them a hand.
Yeah.
That's I mean, intention's good, but don't do that.
Yes. Let people patch their own stuff.
Yes. Still, let people know.
Definitely newsworthy news.
Yes, big news.
Absolutely big news. And what a bombshell to end on.
Yeah.
I don't know why we squeezed in a cheeky handshake. It's probably because we're never really able to handshake.
Can we have one more bit of news?
I don't know. What was the bit of news?
Oh, this is your news.
Oh, it's my news. Yes, after an emotional 6 years, one of the reasons why today...
No, not that news.
Oh.
What day is it today, Chris?
today is what is today? I don't know. It's the 14th.
Sure.
Well, we already talked about that.
No.
Anyway, today is National Shortcut Appreciation Day. We've already said at the beginning of.
Did we say at the beginning?
At the beginning, yeah, I mentioned it. We cheersed to Lou.
How much is this?
Probably too much for you. We did absolutely say yes. 100%. We said thank you to Lou, and I think coming into the end of this season of DBAle, and obviously looking towards the future, working with Lou has been absolutely fantastic. She's been the heart and soul of DBAle, and we've just rocked up and basically shouted at a microphone for 50 minutes each time. But we do want to make sure that everybody knows how amazing Lou has been, and she's been the best producer ever.
Yep, she is our soapbox.
She is our absolute soapbox, and we don't stand on her, but she is absolutely our soapbox. She's the person who definitely gets involved, has been our champion as well within the business as well. I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So let's all take the opportunity to appreciate Lou. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Lou. And that brings us to the end.
It does.
So yeah, the final bit of news is that's the end of season 1.
That is the end of season 1. Will we return? Will DBAle return? Let us know on Twitter. Go and follow us. You can follow us at Redgate, at Kurzweil Chris, at Plant-Based Sequel. You'll find us there. Let us know if you want us to continue. Let us know if you want a season 2, and we'll make sure.
Ending.
And yeah,
will Chris and Chris finally get together?
Oh no, will they save the Earth in time? Find out next time on DBAle Season 2? ? Cheers.
Cheers. I really like that ending.